Welcome to Deep Dive. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict, and I want to welcome everyone out there today. Today, I'm really thrilled to be able to introduce my guest today, Satyam Vaghani, VP and General Manager of IoT and AI at Nutanix. Thanks for joining us, Satyam.
Oh, of course, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show, Kevin.
Absolutely. So where are you calling in from today, Satyam?
I'm calling in from the Nutanix headquarters, which is in sunny San Jose.
Hey, right down the street where our office is in Palo Alto. Although I'm calling in today from our McCall, Idaho studio.
All right, but, now I know.
Just left Palo Alto. All right. So talk to us about yourself, Satyam. What's your background? How'd you end up at Nutanix?
I'm a geek by training, a computer scientist, and I ended up at Nutanix through an acquisition. 3 years ago, Nutanix acquired a company called Nutanix Data. I was one of the founders. And then at Nutanix, my day job is to bring some bleeding edge technologies to market, specifically a product around IoT and AI that we've been shipping since last year. And so addressing a new market around edge computing and IoT applications. And before all of that, I spent around 10 years at a company called VMware. That was a great journey as well.
I was out there 2 days ago. Matter of fact, on a call yesterday. So I know the team well out there. Yeah. Well, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to focus in on us and answer some questions and just share your world with the rest of us here. For those of us that are involved in the Internet of Things ecosystem, what part of IoT are you interested in the most? You know, there's everything from the sensors to embedded machines to the networks to the transportation to security to management, you name it. Yeah. What all do you guys get involved in?
A good point. So in fact, I kind of visualize, all these companies and technologies in the IoT space into three buckets. There's bucket one, which is all about devices and connectivity and security of the devices and connectivity. And then there's bucket two, which is about for want of a better word, legacy IoT use cases, highly vertically integrated IoT apps specific to, let's say, manufacturing or oil and gas or retail and so on. And then more and more, we see and we believe in this bucket three, which is all about data processing, getting insights out of raw IoT data as soon as possible, and insights that can potentially be acted on, which can provide much needed value to business decision making. So we are squarely in that bucket, the data processing bucket. We think that is the long-lasting value out of any IoT project, beyond just the fact that you're going to deploy a whole bunch of infrastructure.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's everything we do around Internet of Things is just to gather more data that we act upon, right?
Exactly. So historically, we think, it's been easy to gather data. In fact, there have been analyst reports which say that, in comparison to roughly 8 zettabytes of data that was gathered in the public and private clouds of the world combined in 2017, in comparison to that, 256 zettabytes of data was gathered on the edge, in enterprise IoT type scenarios. But the problem is that data is discarded because the volume is so significant that people don't quite have a handle on how to process that data and how to process that on time. Because, with time, the data kind of loses its value. If you are trying to look at how many people are waiting at a line, say at your retail store checkout or at an airport check-in desk or some such thing, you need to do it ASAP, not 5 minutes from now or 10 minutes from now. So I think that's the big problem, is the friction of making it real, that data processing, given the volume of data. And we think it's a big problem to solve.
Makes perfect sense. So talk to us about your specific role at Nutanix. What do you get
All
to
right.
do on a
So
daily basis?
I manage the IoT product and then the go-to-market for that product. And specifically, we, Nutanix, we've created a product called Xi IoT, which is squarely focused on enterprise IoT use cases. And then my job is to kind of, look after the roadmap of that product. We can go into the specifics, obviously, and then also go after certain verticals around taking the product to market.
I always think that's interesting when they combine roles with, as you said, you're a geek by training,
Yeah.
but now you have product marketing responsibilities too. How do you merge those two areas of responsibility?
That's an interesting observation. In fact, I've thought about it in the sense of my own career. I think more than anything, that has helped me become a better uh, product creator, a better product person, because now we are able to kind of fully close the loop of not just the ideation process that leads to a product, but then the process of you know marrying that technology, all those ideas, the geeky ideas, so to speak, with real use cases. Uh, and we often kind of forget to make that link. We often think that some cool technology that we have invented obviously deserves a place in market, but it's equally important to kind of think from the customer first and then kind of do that linkage, so it closes the loop. And I think that has at least personally helped me a lot in terms of the agility at which we develop the product, because we have a very clear direction coming in from the market along with our own thoughts
Interesting.
about how the project should mature. It has also kind of frankly led to a much kind of better engineering process in terms of just people satisfaction. Engineers get a lot of satisfaction now because they can clearly see the almost direct linkage between their work and just a month later maybe somebody using their work out in the open.
So interesting. So talk to us about how the IoT product line fits in with kind of the overall Nutanix.
Right. So maybe I can give you a minute worth of context on what Nutanix was founded on, and then maybe paint IoT into that picture. And so, our founding principle was that the core properties that people have come to appreciate out of the public cloud, let's say, the agility of operations and deploying new workloads, or the ability to scale, or the ability to do one-click features like provisioning and security and lifecycle management. We think all those properties don't necessarily have to be locked into the public cloud. We can potentially democratize it. So that was the founding principle around Nutanix, is how can we make all those properties available to any private cloud operator, for example. And we did it through a product called, or a technology called hyper-convergence, which is this thesis around using servers as building blocks and then layering them with software, which aggregates a whole bunch of these servers into a extremely flexible compute, storage, and networking fabric. And so now applications can be deployed to that fabric as opposed to being deployed onto a server. So it makes all the kind of the underlying infrastructure complexity disappear from the application layer. So that was our kind of genesis. We've since then, this was 10 years ago. Since then, we went public in the year 2016. We had more than 12,000 customers. Hundreds of customers in the global 2000. I think around 35 of the Forbes 50 global customers. And so it's been a great business. But then along the way, just like any good journey, we've found new use cases. And so now coming to the topic of IoT, one of the things that happened as we took hyperconvergence to market is one big success area for hyperconvergence was edge locations. So factories, airports, retail stores, oil and gas rigs, oil rigs. And so these are all very kind of literally all dispersed all across the world. and people found hyperconvergence to be a great way to deploy, a great form factor to deploy infrastructure as for these use cases, because you could just deploy that kind of core brick, which was the server, and then solve a lot of problems in software instead of deploying a lot of different moving parts and then having to deploy IT experts at 1,000 factories or 1,000 oil rigs to manage that stuff. And so when that happened, we naturally got exposed to a new set of use cases, right? And that was around, we saw that in retail, for example, people are working towards smart checkout like scenarios, or they were working towards using vision systems to detect how people move around in a retail store, and which shelves do they stop by, or which particular kind of line of clothing they stop by. In oil and gas, it was more about getting all the machine data to super optimize the efficiency that you get out of your drilling operations. In manufacturing, it was about automating your production line, so automating the QA process, checking each and every thing that comes out of your production line for quality. So and all these use cases were about using new technologies like AI, for example, to do something interesting. For example, using AI to detect what you bought and just to automatically present you with a bill instead of you having to walk past a checkout counter and a cashier. So we not only discovered this new kind of set of use cases, but we also saw that needed a new treatment in terms of technology. The old models of client server applications or database applications, those are still kind of needed to power some point of sale type applications for retail, for example. But alongside those stacks, you also need a new stack, which lets you create microservices. And those microservices are doing data processing, like we said earlier, to get insights out of real world data. So that was our journey, is we ended up creating that new stack, which lets you get insights out of data. And that lets you do that at an extremely, extremely large scale, at the scale of, say, thousands of airports or thousands of factories or thousands of stores.
So let me personalize this, Satyam. Let me ask you this. Which of all those different areas that you're focused on and you're bringing together and you create a stack, which of those areas is most interesting to you?
Frankly, it's a good question, and that, I do feel like a kid in a candy shop nowadays. There's so many problems to solve. But if I were to crystallize it to, let's say, two very interesting and important problems to me personally is, in this new world, we need to solve a whole bunch of problems for the operator. Is if you think about it, it's hard enough to operate a single data center for an enterprise person. And now we are going to say that, look, every oil rig that you are going to operate is a mission critical data center, because the data, the assets that you have are mission critical, or every airport that you are going to operate, or every factory. So the question is, what does it take for us as a technology provider to provide a planet scale control plane, a planet scale application and infrastructure lifecycle plane for all these operators, that they can sit at one point and literally manage an estate that is 1,000 oil rigs? So that is one interesting problem for me, is planet scale operations. We'll see more and more enterprises will need to operate at planet scale.
Wow.
And the second big problem that excites me is the developer problem. Is if you think about it, there are so many blogs and conferences around Kubernetes or AI and so on. But if you think about it, there's only a handful of companies that have actually practically implemented AI to really transform their business processes. And so the question is, what can we provide as a technology provider to make AI much more democratic, or microservices much more democratic? And so that involves solving a lot of problems, along the kind of the journey of actually deploying an AI kind of application in the real world. Of course, that's maybe a discussion for another time. But, at least my take is, or in fact, Nutanix's take is, that if we can automate all those problems into a platform, then we can make all those problems at least go away from a developer's point of view, and they can focus more on the business logic as opposed to all the infrastructure logic and all the systems logic and the security logic and the scaling logic that they need to actually industrialize these kind of applications. So
it's really interesting to me, Satyam, right now, how much philosophy actually gets pulled into our companies now. The way we approach product design, the way we market, the way we treat people, the way we market our products, the way we treat privacy and we respect our customers. I mean, philosophy and ethics are becoming core to everybody now, aren't they?
Very true, very true. In fact, we talk about this thing as, all these technologies are pretty interesting, but at the end of the day, the first thing any company should do is this thing we call design thinking, right? Lead with design. And design is not just about what technology you are going to use or how it's going to look, but it's about, like you said, it's about how you are going to design your people and processes to kind of march along with all this new technology transformation that's going to come around. That's a very hard problem. And it requires the same kind of design thinking that we typically, attribute to our technology stack. And that's a very new concept.
So with the kinds of deep technology stacks that you have, how much of your energy on the marketing side, if we take off our geek hat and put on our marketing hat, and we look at and say, how much of our marketing is actually educating our marketplace?
A lot of it. Good point. In that, there is clarity that just based on the amount of data that is going to be produced on the edge, somebody needs to do something about it. But then the exact use cases are all quite emerging. And then even if the use case is clear, the exact way to solve that use case, again, from a people, product, and process point of view, is not clear. So a lot of this kind of go-to-market is about educating people about how to be disciplined about this. We can very easily be chaotic about it. We can very easily go on Amazon, buy a Raspberry Pi.
Yes.
Say, look, here's a fancy application that works. But there's a long journey between just making a POC work on a Raspberry Pi to actually making it work at your hundreds of factories, maintaining it, arming the people with the right kind of development skill set and the operations skill set to make it successful. And that's really the kind of the education that we often do kind of undertake with our customers.
Yeah. So
we learn from it because we learn from them as much as they learn from us.
Satyam, let's get tactical now. Yeah. How do you actually do that? Is it white papers? Is it collaboratories where you sit down and do labs? Yeah. Is it all kind of demo based and POC based? Yeah. Or do you have an innovation classroom where you try to think through things? How does that actually work?
Yes. All of it. But all of it. But of course, again, like I said, in a disciplined manner, I'm a big American football fan. So, if you need to achieve something, if you are going to go to a championship, you really need to make a program out of it. Mm-hmm. So what we typically tell our end users is, the journey is in 3 steps. The first step is just design thinking. How about we work together, whether it is kind of meetings at a high level, low level with practitioners. But, through those meetings, we crystallize what are the use cases that are important to the end user, but at the same time, what are the use cases that are actually achievable, say, in the next year versus the next 3 years. Because often we kind of start with the most imaginative use cases, and that is potentially a recipe for failure, because until you kind of crawl or walk, you're not going to run. So we need a good blend of use cases that are going to demonstrate great ROI, but at the same time are very practical for the organization to absorb and for the technology to deliver. The second thing we talk about is pilot. Is, people often spend a lot of time in the design phase or in the ideation phase, but at some point you got to just be bold enough to say, let's go at a small scale. Let's take, say, 5 stores, or let's take 5 oil rigs or 5 airports, and let's make something happen. And so So, and that something happening obviously needs a lot of help from Nutanix. We often kind of help them build these AI type applications that often they are building for the first time. And then the third step is scale, right? Is, what are we going to do to kind of deploy it at industrial scale? So that's a journey. And again, a lot of kind of, two-way conversations, lots of handholding. But the thing that excites me, Kevin, about this is at any point in the journey, we are always talking about the high level outcome of the business, and we are always talking about something that is extremely exciting to the CEO or the CIO or the chief digital officer. And that's a great thing. I mean, that's just, that's how technology should be. We should stop talking about all the kind of bits and bytes and speeds and feeds, focus more on, going from
Oh, yeah. Where's the business value? So this is a fascinating topic to me, Satyam, because, a typical product marketer would already know exactly the person he's going after in a company.
Yeah.
He has everything kind of documented out. So it's really account-based marketing to a named list of companies with the named individuals and their roles within the company. You have value propositions, you have personas identified, you have personalized content that you can provide for each persona. So you have this kind of automated marketing environment.
Yeah.
You're in the innovation space. So, I mean, that's it. You don't have the luxury of having that kind of environment necessarily. You have to, dig in there with other geeks and just figure it out, don't you?
We have to figure it out. And in fact, I am very excited about the journey because, in fact, we will get to that automated phase at some point. And, the excitement for me, the challenge for me is to, in fact, figure out, working with all these early adopters, so to speak, to, figure out what are the common patterns. And good news is there are common patterns. Just as an example, just so we are not talking too much in the abstract. For example, one common pattern we found was that, we can talk a lot about AI, but one common pattern we found is we try to focus people on vision analytics, right? That's how humans, for example, make decisions, right? We see things and we decide. For example, we could be a gate agent at an airport, and you look at the queue that is forming up, and you can decide that I need help. So, for example, we can train computers to do the same thing. Just work off of cameras, and so these are the type of things, that design patterns that we can crystallize, that makes it the problem much more tractable, right? So now we are suddenly able to change the conversation from, oh, well, yeah, it's not a conversation about deploying thousands of new sensors and new devices. It's a conversation about actually leveraging what you already have, which is cameras that are already installed at the airports or stores or factories, and making more out of that data. So, and then, of course, going back to your point, that is then the kind of the key message that we roll into our marketing campaign. Saying, look, this is how we can put a lid on the initial investment that you need to make in terms of people, products, and processes.
Satyam, thank you so much for just sharing kind of the life cycle of what products look like, how to work with early adopters, how to work in a fascinating space where you're sitting down with some of the biggest challenges that the C-level suite has, and you're trying to figure out how this technology can be applied to the problems they have. So all of that is just fascinating. I want to thank you so much for sharing with us today. And I want to thank the rest of you out there for tuning in as well. Thank you.
And thanks, Kevin, for inviting me.